Hello people, Linker here, and today we have a huge video doing 3 things. We're going to talk about stargazing in 4 factions, set the record straight about the biggest mistake players make, and lastly, talk about what works in the endgame campaign so you can see what you have, plan ahead, and destroy the endgame where others get stuck. In the background, there's my 35-head solution, and in the foreground, we'll start with the most common mistake I see. I was talking with a smart F2P friend of mine about viable endgame sets. He told me, Linker, I have AFKArena Burst, I run it with Skriath, why do I need to gaze? That's perfectly right, and if you look at F2P play as a chapter 33, even at the start of 34, that works awesome. So I answered him. The issue is as you pave towards the endgame, where enemies get their signature items, the pure factional AFKArena set is nowhere to be found in chapter 35 replays. Now why is that? Because when enemies get abilities, if you're doing minimum power, that set just isn't enough. I know that's hard to believe if you're doing it now feeling like a god just decimating chapter 32, but take it from me, we have the data to support this. So I showed him my data set of endgame chapter 35 replays. We talked about some of the top F2P players who run hundreds of thousands of replays and macros and hasten emulators, the top of the top, and if that doesn't work for them, eventually agreed it just doesn't work at all. He's a smart guy though, he didn't give up there. He followed up asking me, well Linker, if this is a chapter 35 issue, I'll handle it once I'm there. Now, his logic is accurate in theory, but in practice, it's terrible mistake that got many of my friends to burn out and quit AFKArena. How come, you might be asking? So I explained to him, that doesn't really work either. The reason is you gain rewards for progression. If you don't use them to stargaze early enough, you'll find yourself stuck before you know it, progressing incredibly slowly with very little flexibility around the sets you can use. He looked up the data and told me, Zorath and Lucretia, these are the 2 hypogeans that are necessary, nothing else. His reasoning was, sure, Orthos is nice for that set, but if you have just these 2, it can work. So if you gaze them specifically chapter 33, and until then you run 4 faction, you should be good. Now, I could tell he's really passionate about this. So this is my most in-depth answer. That doesn't really work either. If you look at the data, sure, if you have Zorath and Lucretia, you can make a variable burst set. Sometimes it's going to take you just one of them. The issue is against certain bosses with minimum power, other sets require other Celes hypos. Sure, Talene can be substituted by Source in the God comp, but that substitute is not perfect. When you need the God comp to win a campaign burst matchup, think an AFKArena Thalia thing, Source just doesn't work, he's too slow. Because of this, you might need both Lucretia and Zorath as well as Talene to progress a decent deficit, and that carries on to different sets and Celes hypos too. So if you want to cut it in min power and not be stuck for 30 levels, you'll have to have some level of flexibility, and his solution just does not offer that. If priorities are what you're after, you should check my stargazing guides, link in the description, but as long as you don't want to be stuck in the endgame campaign, gazing seems to get better the more we look at it. Look, there are differences. 500 diamonds, 300 diamonds, 4% for an elite, 2% for the hero. I get it. It's not as big as some people think, by the way, if you look at the numbers. When you look at the rates, when you look at the rewards, transitioning to stargazing in is inevitable, and you should do it early so that you don't pay the price late. And when you realize the rates are not as bad as people say, when you realize the rewards that people often disregard, it just leads to the inevitable conclusion that stargazing flexibility is worth the 4 faction sacrifice. Now that segues me to the second topic. Now that we're all consensus about the fact that eventually you'll need to stargaze, the question is, when do you start stargazing? When do you start making that sacrifice? When do you transition? Look, you should not give up on the Tavern Salmons altogether. I've made that case in the AIM podcast. You should definitely go watch that. It's more of a balance kind of thing where you need to plan things right. Allow me to explain. If one set meta takes one good carry, sometimes like Damon, Isolde, Aaron, or Irons, here you'll need to plan how to get enough sets in the right time. The middle of chapter 31 is where you'll need a good second carry set, and at the end of chapter 32 you'll need 3. By chapter 33, you'll need 4, and towards the end of it, you'll need 5 good carry sets that can carry you through campaign. While these numbers seem threatening, if you made the sacrifice to stargaze early, your progression here can be smooth. One good carry set you should have by default. I do recommend some flexibility though. I recommend at least 8 usable, viable endgame heroes ascended. I've seen some lucky players achieve that as early as chapter 22, but even if you're there at chapter 25, that's all good. The 20s are the ultimate time to sacrifice short-term progress to reap long-term rewards. Keep choice summoning the core heroes you need, but with your spare diamonds, somewhere in your 20s, once you have those 8 heroes, start gazing Twins and Lucretia. That kind of planning is going to be key if you want to avoid getting stuck, because it's the main reason people get stuck. That's the premise. Realize what choice summons you need to make. Balance your investments and transition right to win the endgame. Lastly, I want to talk to you about what works in the endgame even past chapter 33. First, the 5 main sets. Ainz works. Even without his signature Ainz God Comp set, he can make his own set with Albedo and relevant support. If you have Ainz and Albedo, you have an endgame set, it's that simple. Second, God Comp works. If you have either Talene or Saurus, either Mahira or Tassie, Aziz, Warren, and Twins, you have a set that can break most anything, even max deficits. Third, Lucretia and Aaron Burst often merge into a more powerful combination of the two, but can be run separately. Fourth, Damon is still awesome in the endgame, still incredibly popular, not in 100% of sets, but probably 95% to 90% of endgame replays. You see Damon completely decimating tanks he's up against. Check out the Damon overview I did with Vulcan earlier. And lastly, as much as I hate to admit it, Thorin. Now, I'm not gonna ruin my wonderful channel with this kind of Thorin propaganda because often you won't run one of these sets, either because you don't have all that's needed or because it has a bad matchup. This is where other carries come into play. Gwyneth is an easy 6 set. Isolde sometimes does wonders. Flora can carry certain stall or Celos Graveborn sets, and you people watching this channel are waiting me to say Khazard. There's plenty fragmentations, Flora, Orthos, Talene sets requiring creative substitutions, and plenty niche carries and counters like Vork and Odin that can really bring you forward if used correctly. This is where skills comes into play, but in this video, I think we covered the basics. Silver's also created a wonderful resource about this, recently shown in a Vulcan video. It's still being revised, I'm not 100% on everything. I'll share it once it's ready and I know it's not misleading anybody. So for now, like and subscribe, it means a lot to me. Do it if you enjoy my content. I think this kind of a talk is something a lot of people ask for, so they have a resource to refer to when transitioning to gazing. The Lilith collab is a great opportunity. I'll link you people to. It's taking some work for me so I can really bring it to the next level. But as you can tell, I'm working extra to keep up the content going while I'm at it. Hope to see you soon. But for now, I've been Linker. Peace.